He doesn't call during the day. He doesn't ask how you've been. He doesn't offer you consistency, presence, or a place to feel safe. But he texts you at midnight, and somehow, that feels like something. In this video, we're going to walk into a space most people avoid, that confusing, aching part of you that still checks your phone at night, hoping. This isn't a guidebook. It's not a list of red flags or dating advice. It's something else entirely. A reflection, a quiet mirror, a way back to yourself. Because when someone texts you at midnight, it's not always about wanting you. Sometimes, it's about needing the version of themselves that only you can see. And maybe, deep down, a part of you still thinks your love can fix that. But love is not a repair shop. So sit back. Let your heart breathe. Let the truth come gently, not all at once. And if you find pieces of yourself here in these pauses, in these words, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Not because you're told to, but because something in you whispered, "This feels like home." He texts you at midnight, because that's when the noise dies down. When the lights go off and the world becomes still, that's when his shadows start speaking. That's when the ache inside him grows too loud to ignore. But here's the part no one tells you. He doesn't text because he misses you. Not in the way you deserve. Not in the way that builds anything. He texts because he remembers how your voice used to soothe the parts of him he never learned to sit with. He texts because you're warm, and the night gets cold, because you never judged him, because you saw him before he even knew who he was. And that kind of knowing? It's intoxicating. Especially to someone who spent their whole life hiding. And maybe, just maybe, a part of you feels honored by that. You feel chosen in the stillness. You feel special, because he only opens up to you. But here's the question I want to ask you, the one no one ever dares to ask out loud. Does it feel good, or does it just feel familiar? Because sometimes we mistake recognition for connection. Sometimes we mistake emotional hunger for love. And if you grew up starving for someone's attention, if love came in crumbs, if comfort came through silence and guessing and performing, then someone texting you at midnight feels like home. But home isn't always safe. Sometimes home is where the wounds started. So here you are, holding a phone with his name lighting up your screen, wondering if this is a sign he still cares or just another breadcrumb he tosses when he feels lonely. And the truth is, it's both. He does care, in his way. But what is his way costing you? You've taught yourself to listen to tone shifts, to decode the empty spaces between his words, to build stories around his half-efforts. That's not connection. That's survival. It's loving with your nervous system instead of your heart. It's staying up late wondering what you did wrong, why he disappears for days and comes back like nothing happened with a hey or a thinking about you. It's not a message. It's a test. He wants to know if the door is still open. And you want to believe that this time, maybe, he means it. Maybe he finally felt your absence. Maybe this time, the pain woke him up. But if he only reaches for you when he's aching, you are not a partner. You are his medicine. And that's not love, that's a wound. He knows you'll answer. He knows you'll open the door. You always do, not because you're weak, but because your heart is wired to hope. You weren't built to give up easily. You believe in people. You believe in healing. You believe that love, when it's deep enough, can reach into someone's darkest corners and pull them into the light. But here's the part that breaks you. He doesn't stay. He never stays. He visits, briefly, tenderly, almost like a dream, and then he vanishes again, leaving behind the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. You stare at your screen after he says goodnight. The silence that follows feels louder than anything he wrote, and you start to wonder, why does this hurt more than if he hadn't texted at all? It's because it reopens the door you were trying to close, because you almost moved on. You almost made it through a day without checking your phone. You almost felt whole. But his midnight messages don't just interrupt your sleep, they interrupt your healing. He doesn't mean to hurt you, that's the part that makes it worse. He doesn't even see it. To him, it's just a message. To you, it's a memory with a heartbeat. It's a song you don't want to hear but can't bring yourself to skip. Because deep down, you remember how he used to make you laugh when no one else could. You remember the way he looked at you when he was sober with his truth, the nights when he didn't run, when he didn't hide. You're not crazy for holding on to that. That was real. It was just incomplete. And you've convinced yourself that if you wait long enough, if you stay soft, if you love him the right way, maybe he'll come back differently. But loving someone into change is not your responsibility. You cannot carry both his past and your future. You cannot hold him and yourself at the same time. Not when he only shows up for fragments. You deserve someone who texts you at noon, who checks on you just because, someone who shows up when it's inconvenient, who stays through the quiet, who loves you without needing to be chased. But I know that version of love might feel boring, predictable, almost too easy. Because when you've lived on edge, calm feels suspicious. When you've been conditioned to chase, being chosen feels foreign. And yet, you crave it. You ache for it. Not the chaos, not the confusion, the steady, the safe, the soul-deep knowing that you're not just a place someone returns to when their world is falling apart, but a home someone protects before the storm begins. And yet, every time he texts you at midnight, something stirs inside. It's not just the memory of him, it's the memory of you. The version of yourself that believed she could be enough for someone who never really stayed. The girl who tried to be the exception. The one who thought if she loved hard enough, soft enough, patiently enough, maybe this time she'd finally be chosen. But listen closely, that hope you feel, it isn't about him. It's about the little girl inside you who learned that love had to be earned. That to be loved, you had to wait. That being wanted only came after proving you were good, or useful, or strong enough to fix someone. So when he texts you at midnight, it's not just the man you're answering. It's your old blueprint. It's the echo of every time someone showed up halfway and called it love. And still, you open the door not because you want the pain, but because pain is familiar. And in the loneliness of the night, familiar things feel safe, even if they hurt. But I need you to ask yourself something you've never dared to say out loud. What would happen if you didn't answer? What would happen if, instead of hoping he finally sees you, you started seeing yourself? Not through his silence, or his sudden messages, or his soft apologies followed by longer disappearances, but through your own worth, your own knowing, your own healing. Because midnight is sacred. It's when the world quiets down enough for you to hear your truth again. And maybe your truth is this: he doesn't love you the way you need to be loved. Maybe he can't. Maybe he never learned how. And maybe, just maybe, that's not your fault. You didn't break him. You just tried to love him with everything you had. But love is not about giving until you're empty. It's about giving from a place that still leaves you full. And this love, it's been draining you for too long. Because no matter how many times he texts, he never brings water to your roots. He only stirs the dust. You keep thinking that if you stay available, if you keep answering, one day he'll realize what he's losing. But people don't change because you love them louder. They change when they choose to meet themselves. And he hasn't. He's still running, still reaching for you in the dark, because he doesn't know how to sit with his own. You are not a resting place for someone avoiding their pain. You are not a midnight escape. You are not a temporary balm for a permanent ache. You are the storm and the calm, the fire and the forest, the depth he cannot swim in yet. And maybe he never will. That's the ache you don't want to face. The possibility that someone you saw so much beauty in, someone who touched something sacred in you, might never rise to meet the version of themselves you fell in love with. You saw potential. You saw softness. You saw the quiet boy behind the bravado, the man he could become. If only he'd stop running. But the thing about potential is, it's not a promise. And when you build a life around maybe someday, you end up losing today. You sit alone with your phone glowing at 12:17 a.m., heart racing, mind spinning stories. You reread his words, trying to decipher if this time is different, if the message means more than just, "I miss your energy." But if he misses your energy more than he misses you, then he never truly knew you. He knew the way you made him feel. He knew the safety of your understanding. He knew the way your voice didn't ask him to be anything but present. But knowing how someone makes you feel is not the same as loving them. And I know that truth lands like a quiet betrayal, because you thought you were building something. You thought the deep conversations, the late-night confessions, the laughter that made your chest ache, you thought all of it meant something lasting. But some people enter your life not to stay, but to awaken the parts of you that forgot how to feel. And he did that. He lit something in you. He reminded you of the way your soul stirs when it's seen, even if only briefly. And now you're learning that just because someone unlocks a part of you doesn't mean they're meant to keep the key. Maybe that's the heartbreak no one talks about. The grief of realizing someone mattered deeply, but only for a season. The sorrow of knowing you gave your heart to someone who only wanted it in fragments. But darling, you are not fragments. You are whole, even when you feel hollow, even when you ache, even when the silence after his message feels heavier than any goodbye. He texts you at midnight because that's when his loneliness roars louder than his pride. But he never texts in the morning. He never asks what your day looks like, how your heart is healing, what dreams you're chasing, because you were never part of his daylight. You were the moon he whispered to in secret. And maybe it's time to stop orbiting around someone who only sees your light in the dark. Maybe it's time to rise with the sun, even if it means walking alone for a while. Because that aloneness, it's not emptiness, it's space. Space to remember who you are when no one's pulling at your energy, when no one's dipping in and out of your softness, when no one's testing the strength of your boundaries just to see if they still bend. You are not here to be a lifeline for someone who never learned how to swim. You are not meant to spend your nights deciphering half-hearted messages, reading between silences, searching for meaning in crumbs. You are not meant to bleed emotionally so someone else can feel alive. But how could you know that when all you've ever known is trying to be enough, trying to be the exception, trying to hold on to someone who's never truly held you? He texts you at midnight because he knows your door creaks open just wide enough for him to slide through, not with love, not with certainty, but with just enough familiarity to make you hesitate before closing it. And you've mistaken that hesitation for destiny. You've whispered to yourself, there must be a reason he keeps coming back. But baby, not everything that returns is meant to stay. Sometimes the lesson doesn't come in the loving, it comes in the leaving. In the moment you finally stop answering, in the moment you finally say, I deserve more than this. Not louder, just clearer, not angry, just anchored. You see, healing doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like watching the phone light up and choosing not to reach back. Not because you're punishing him, not because you want revenge, but because you've remembered your worth. Because you no longer need someone else's confusion to validate your clarity. Because you're done mistaking temporary attention for lasting affection. You deserve love that doesn't confuse you. You deserve mornings with good luck on your meeting. And did you sleep okay? Not 1:12 a.m. texts laced in nostalgia, and just enough warmth to make you ache. And maybe the most radical thing you can do right now is not reply. Not this time, not anymore, because the truth is, you're not healing for him. You're healing for the version of yourself who once thought this was the best she could get. For the younger you who believed love meant effort without return. For the soul inside you that's tired of bending to fit into someone else's inability to choose her. You're healing because you want peace more than you want answers. And because peace never comes from people who only call when they're in pieces. You used to think that love was about proving yourself, that if you were understanding enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, they would finally stay. But love isn't something you earn, it's something that meets you fully, gently, clearly, without games, without timing that always seems just a little off, without you having to lose pieces of yourself to make it feel whole. He texts you at midnight because he hasn't healed, because he doesn't know how to sit in his own loneliness without reaching for someone else's light. Because when the night falls and there's no one left to distract him from himself, he remembers you, the one who never needed him to perform, the one who listened, the one who made him feel real, and you confuse that remembering with devotion. But love doesn't come dressed in regret. It comes dressed in presence. It shows up every day, not perfectly, but honestly. You keep hoping he'll change, that one day he'll wake up, feel your absence like a thunderclap, and realize you were it all along. But here's what you need to know. Some people don't wake up. They keep dreaming, wandering, drifting from one soul to another, searching for something they can't quite name because they've never dared to meet their own reflection. You were not put here to be someone's mirror. You were meant to be the ocean, deep, healing, vast. Not something someone dips into when they need relief, but something someone protects, cherishes, and sails with, fully present in the tides. He texts you at midnight because he wants to feel close to something true, but he's not ready to live in truth. He doesn't ask how your heart island. He doesn't ask what you've lost while loving him. He just wants to know if you'll still answer. And if you do, it'll feel like a spark. But a spark isn't a fire, and fire is what you need. The kind that warms your soul, the kind that stays lit in the daylight, the kind that builds, not burns. So tonight, when your phone lights up, When the ache returns, I want you to pause. I want you to breathe. I want you to remember this. You are not hard to love. You never were. You were just offering forever to someone who only ever unpacked their suitcase when the moon was high and the world was quiet. And now, you're allowed to choose differently. You're allowed to protect your peace more than his feelings. You're allowed to stop answering the door for someone who never plans to stay. Not because you don't love them, but because you finally love yourself more. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come with funerals or goodbyes. It comes quietly when you realize someone is alive, still breathing, still out there, and yet they'll never be who you needed them to be. That grief doesn't scream. It lingers. It sits with you in the moments no one sees. When your favorite song plays, when you pass the place where you first met, when a memory shows up uninvited, warm and cruel at the same time. He texts you at midnight, and every time, a part of you comes back to life. But it's the part of you that aches. The part that keeps wondering if you made it all up. If the way he looked at you meant nothing. If you were just convenient. Just temporary. But let me tell you something real. You weren't imagining it. He did feel something. He just didn't know what to do with it. Because love that asks a man to rise, to face his own shame, to meet you with truth, that kind of love terrifies the ones who've spent their whole lives running. You didn't fail him. You called him forward, but he chose to stay behind. And that's not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of where he islanded. There is nothing noble about waiting for someone who's not walking toward you. There is no prize for patience that costs your peace. You can love someone deeply and still walk away. You can care without offering yourself on the altar of their confusion. And I know, you're scared. Scared that letting go means losing the last thing that felt like connection. Scared that if you stop answering, no one else will ever reach out again. But listen to me. The space you create when you stop responding, it's sacred because it's the space where real love can finally find you. Not the kind that comes at midnight in half-formed words. Not the kind that tiptoes in when the world is dark and disappears before the sun rises. But the kind that knocks at your door in broad daylight. That shows up every time. That asks about your day. That listens when your voice trembles. That doesn't need the cover of night to be soft. That kind of love is waiting, but it can't come in while you're still entertaining ghosts. You're not here to be haunted. You're here to be held. So when your phone lights up again and you feel your heart pull toward the familiar, I want you to remember this. You've already made it through the worst part. The night you cried alone, holding a phone that never rang. The morning you woke up after silence and still gave yourself grace. The days you doubted your own worth and still chose to rise. You are not waiting anymore. You are becoming. Becoming isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with grand declarations or sweeping changes. It's subtle, quiet. It's the moment you read his message and don't respond, not out of anger, but out of reverence for your own peace. It's the breath you take when you start to feel the old pull, the ache to fix, to soothe, to rescue, and you choose stillness instead. It's the softness you give yourself when the loneliness creeps in, and you no longer reach for someone who only shows up in fragments. This is what healing looks like. Not the absence of pain, but the return of self. It's remembering the sound of your own voice after years of silencing it to keep the peace. It's rebuilding trust with your own intuition after constantly doubting it for someone who only told half-truths. It's asking yourself finally, what do I need? And not feeling guilty for answering honestly, because for so long your needs felt like a burden. You learn to shrink them, apologize for them, hide them beneath being understanding, easygoing, low maintenance. But love, real love, doesn't ask you to vanish. It doesn't come with conditions wrapped in compliments. It doesn't make you feel like too much or not enough at the same time. It simply stays. And he, the one who texts you at midnight, he doesn't stay. He lingers. He hovers. He returns just enough to keep the hope alive. Never enough to build anything real. And that's not your fault. It's just his limit. But it's not your limit because you are built for depth, for intimacy, for mornings that begin with warmth, not confusion. You are built for touch that doesn't disappear with the Sunday, for connection that doesn't rely on silence to survive. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to walk away not just from him, but from the version of yourself that kept choosing less because it felt like all you could get. You don't owe anyone access to your heart just because they remembered it in the middle of the night. You are not a place people visit when they need to feel something. You are a cathedral, a universe, a truth that deserves to be chosen in the full light of day. So this time, when he texts you at midnight, I hope you're sleeping. I hope you're dreaming of something better. I hope your phone lights up and you don't even notice. Because your soul is finally resting. You are becoming love, and becoming is the most beautiful kind of goodbye. There will be moments when it hurts again. Maybe not as sharp, maybe not as consuming, but there will be echoes. A song, a scent, a memory wrapped in warmth that turns cold as soon as it passes. You'll think of his smile, of the way he said your name when he forgot to guard his heart, of that one night where everything felt possible. And in those moments, you might feel the ache rise again, that quiet craving, the one that says, just one more time, just to feel something. But you'll learn how to sit with it. You'll learn that missing someone doesn't mean they're meant to return. You'll learn that longing doesn't always need to be answered. And eventually, you'll see it for what it really is, not a sign to go back, but a reminder of how deeply you can feel, of how deeply you deserve to be felt in return. Because love is not a puzzle to be solved. It's not a wound you need to keep pressing just to remember it's still there. It's not a test. It's a home not in another person, but in yourself first. And when you finally stop answering his midnight texts, you'll feel it. Not all at once, but gradually, like breath returning to lungs that forgot they were holding tension. Like sunlight slipping through curtains you were too afraid to open. Like laughter that comes from your belly, not from the hope that someone else will notice. He will still text you, maybe not every night, but he will. When he feels hollow, when something reminds him of you, when he's tired of pretending he doesn't care. And you'll feel it, the old reflex, the pull to be kind, to reply, to make sure he's okay. But this time, you'll remember, it's not your job to save someone from themselves. You were never meant to be his emergency contact. You were meant to be cherished, fully, every day, not just remembered in moments of weakness. And as that knowing grows stronger, his messages will lose their grip. You'll see them for what they are. Fragments of someone who once mattered, reaching out not for love, but for relief. And you, beautiful soul, are no longer here to be someone's relief. You are here to be held, seen, met. You are not here to beg for the bare minimum. You are here to receive the kind of love you've always given away. And that begins when you stop answering to anything less. When you stop calling it fate just because it feels familiar. When you stop mistaking pain for proof that it was real. Because now, your peace is louder than your longing. Now, your silence speaks louder than his late-night words. Now, you've chosen you, and that changes everything.